You know, there are moments in life when the world finally gets quiet, not peaceful, not soft, just quiet enough for you to hear the things you've been running from. I didn't plan for that kind of moment. It showed up unannounced, like a truth long overdue. A truth that sits you down, looks you in the eye, and says, listen, really listen. It happened on a night that felt heavier than the day before it. No noise, no conversation, no distractions, just me, a dim room, and the weight of my own thoughts. And in that silence, something inside me cracked open. A confession rose to the surface, one I had never said out loud. I thought I understood life until life humbled me. It's strange how you can live decades believing you've already learned your greatest lessons, only to discover you've barely scratched the surface. That night, all the certainties I had collected over the years, the assumptions, the confidence, the beliefs, they didn't feel so certain anymore. Something was shifting, something was calling, and I felt it before I understood it. It started with a name I'd heard 1,000 times, but never truly met. Muhammad. Peace be upon him. A man spoken about by millions, followed by billions, and yet somehow distant to someone like me. Not because of hate, not because of resistance, simply because I never took the time to look beyond the noise. I had seen his name in headlines, in debates, in passing comments made by people who never knew him, and I let those echoes form my understanding. But on that night, for the first time, I felt this pull, a nudge, a whisper, asking me to look deeper. The question that sparked all of this didn't come like a thunderbolt. It wasn't dramatic or grand. It came softly with the gentleness of truth. What if you've spent your entire life hearing things, but never actually listening? That one question hit harder than anything I'd heard in years, because I knew it was true. I knew I had been living on secondhand stories, half-truths, assumptions handed down like hand-me-down clothes that never quite fit. And now, for reasons I still can't fully explain, I felt compelled, almost obligated, to see for myself who this man truly was. So I started searching, reading, listening, not with the goal of agreeing or disagreeing, but simply to understand, to peel back the noise and get to the truth of a man whose life reshaped civilizations. And the first thing that struck me, like a wave that doesn't ask permission before it knocks you down, were the miracles. Not the kind that beg for attention, not the kind that sound like folklore or fantasy, but miracles that carried purpose, depth, intention, miracles that didn't point at him but through him. I read about how he split the moon. Whether you take it literally or see it as symbolic, the message behind it is what arrested my heart. When truth stands in its fullness, even the impossible becomes obedient. Then I learned about the water that flowed from his hands, not as a performance, not as a show, but because people around him were thirsty and he couldn't bear to see them suffer. There was no fame in that, no spotlight, just compassion so deeply embedded in his nature that even miracles bowed to mercy. And then the Quran. The book that was revealed to a man who could neither read nor write, yet its words continued to challenge, inspire, and transform hearts in ways no human text ever could. I remember staring at the page and thinking, how does a man without formal education deliver a message so timeless, so precise, so unshakable? But the miracle that moved me the most, the one that made me stop reading, sit back, and just breathe, wasn't something cosmic or supernatural. It was his character. Because I've lived long enough to know one thing: a little power changes most people. A little recognition inflates most egos. A little success pulls many off their axis. But this man, a man who became a leader, a guide, a messenger, he chose humility over arrogance, forgiveness over revenge, patience over frustration. In a world where everyone wants to be seen, he chose to serve. And I remember thinking, if greatness doesn't corrupt a man like that, then maybe greatness isn't what I thought it was. Learning about him didn't just inform me, it confronted me. It held up a mirror I wasn't prepared to look into, because suddenly I wasn't just learning about a man, I was evaluating myself. I started asking questions I didn't want to ask. When was the last time I chose patience over pride? When did I help someone who couldn't help me back? How many times did anger lead me to places kindness never would have? And when did I mistake being loud for being strong? The world teaches us to climb, to push, to dominate, to win. But Islam, through his example, teaches something very different. That real strength is gentle, that real courage is forgiving, that real leadership looks a lot like service. And for the first time, I saw how flawed my definition of success had been. Success without humility is hollow. Achievement without compassion is empty. Power without purpose is dangerous. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, embodied a balance I never knew was possible. I learned how he lost children, yet remained patient. How he was mocked, rejected, attacked, yet responded with mercy. How he was offered status, power, wealth, yet chose simplicity. And there I was, sitting in my living room with every comfort I could ask for, feeling small. Small in the best way, small in the way that opens space for growth, small in the way that makes room for truth. Because if a man like that walked the earth, a man who had every reason to be hardened but instead became the model of compassion, then what excuse do I have for falling short in the little things? For losing my temper? For holding grudges? For choosing pride over peace? As I continued learning, something beautiful happened. The stories stopped feeling distant. They started feeling familiar, relevant, like reflections, not of someone else's life, but of my own. Suddenly, these miracles weren't historical accounts. They were reminders, lessons, warnings, invitations. And I realized that the biggest miracle wasn't any one moment. It was his message. In a society obsessed with status, he taught sincerity. In a world drowning in ego, he lived humility. In a time of aggression, he embodied mercy. In an age where people fought for control, he surrendered fully to God. And somehow that surrender became the ultimate form of strength. There are a few lines that stayed with me, lines that hit so deep they felt like they were written inside my chest. One was, a miracle isn't always an event, sometimes it's a message. Another, you don't rise by stepping on people, you rise by lifting them. And the one that changed the direction of my heart, the greatest transformation is the one that happens inside you. Those words reshaped the way I saw myself, my past, my purpose. They made me rethink the way I walk through the world, the friendships I choose, the battles I fight, the energy I bring. Because the more I learned, the more I realized that the Prophet's life wasn't just a biography, it was a blueprint. Not for Muslims, not for scholars, not for saints, but for anyone. Anyone who wants to live with meaning, with depth, with sincerity. And now when I look back at that quiet evening, the one that started all this, I feel something I never expected to feel, gratitude, not the loud kind that bursts out in excitement, the quiet kind that settles slow, warms the chest and softens the edges of your soul. Gratitude that God allowed me in whatever small capacity to discover a man whose life continues to change people long after he left this world. I'm not an expert. I'm not a preacher. I'm not someone with theological insight or spiritual authority. I'm just a human being who stumbled upon wisdom I didn't know I needed. Wisdom that calmed me, challenged me, humbled me, and in its own quiet way, healed me. Learning about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, didn't make me feel pressured or judged. It made me feel invited to live more intentionally, invited to treat people with more kindness, invited to breathe a little deeper, walk a little slower, speak a little gentler, invited to a peace I didn't know I was missing. Sometimes God doesn't change your life with a miracle that shakes the sky. Sometimes he changes it with a story that slips softly into your heart. And for me, this story, his story, became a turning point, a quiet shift, a new compass, a reminder that it's never too late to learn, to grow, to become better than the person you were yesterday. So if there's anything I hope you take from my journey, it's this. Keep your heart open. Let truth reach you even when it arrives softly. Let wisdom surprise you even when it comes from a place you never expected. Let humility guide you even when pride insists it knows better. Because sometimes the greatest miracles aren't the ones that break the laws of nature. They're the ones that break the chains around your heart. And to whoever hears these words, may peace find you gently the way it found me.